All right, guys, welcome to the Road Rats podcast. And in today's episode, we are going to be talking about kind of how to get what you want, how to get the goal that you want, and kind of a mindset shift that I had to be able to kind of get there faster or do the correct actions that I know that will get me there. And so kind of the point of today's episode is to underline how to actually do the stuff that creates the wealth, the empire, the status, all that stuff. And I think that this is where people get really tripped up. The reason I say that is because there's kind of three elements to the goal, right? So you have the external result that you're looking for, which might be make more money, get a six pack, whatever. You have the processes, behaviors, and activities that result in that goal, right? Being achieved, which would be like doing the work, right? And then the third aspect is being the type of person who does those things. So basically identifying with those types of behaviors or being the type of person who does those activities, which then creates the reward or the goal. And I think James Clear talks about this in his book, Atomic Habits. And you've probably heard of Be Do Have at some point in your personal development journey. And if you haven't, welcome to the game. This is what I wanted to give to you in this video, is a keystone habit that has served me very well. And it's only been in retrospect, explaining it to someone else that have kind of had more clarity on it, which is why I'm sharing it with you. When I have something that I want, that I do not have, so I have a desire, which means I've made a contract with myself to be unhappy until I get what I want. So there's this thing that I want externally. And I think I've had enough experience with this to know that simply writing down the goal means nothing. And so I think this is contrary to a common belief or practice, which is like people who write down their goals are more likely to succeed. Sure, having a direction is you're more likely to achieve the goal or whatever if you have a direction than not, right? I'm not going to disagree with that. But an interesting statement that may hit you is that winners and losers have the same goals. Everyone in the Olympics has the same goal. Everyone in business has the same goal. We want to make more money, right? And so the goals are actually not that unique. And so the fact that we're writing them down, sure, it's a first step because we have to have a direction in terms of what we're trying to accomplish, sure. But I think that what you'll see that is different is that if you look at two people who have the same goals, one person achieves them and one person hasn't, then it can't be having the goal that is the main driver of success. And so then you dive a step underneath that, which is what are the behaviors that created that goal? And now you get much closer to the things that drive the progress. What gets more interesting is that if we know the activities that are going to generate the result that we want, so maybe we want to get more customers, which means we need to advertise more. But the thing is, people will know what that activity is. They know that inherently they should be doing more of it, and yet they don't. And so that's kind of the purpose that I wanted to drill down in this podcast today is why not? And what is the way that we can try and correct that or fix that? So I wanted to give you the simplest single hack that I have used inadvertently and seen a tremendous amount of success. And that is asking myself the question, what would a person who does this type of thing do in this instance? The one that I'll tell you that I've repeated to myself a lot, probably over the last 2 years, has been the repeated chorus of what would a billionaire do? I think it's because I didn't consider myself to be, or like I was very unclear in like kind of the way that I wanted to go, or like kind of the path that I wanted to take, or the opportunity that I wanted to take. Because in the realm of business, my goal is to become wealthy, right? And so I didn't really know what path to take, but we all know that billionaires are wealthy, correct? And so asking myself, what would a billionaire, or what would the person that is in the place that I want to be, what would they do in my situation? And that's kind of like the mindset switch that I have, because we inadvertently probably already know what we should do to get to the goal, what actions we need to take to get to that goal. But there's so much knowledge out there and everything like that a lot of people are so kind of anxious, and they have so much anxiety around how to take the first step that they actually never end up taking the first step. And that's why a lot of people kind of don't achieve their dreams or whatever, because of that uncertainty on what to do. And so this is kind of what I wanted to hit hard in this video is the hack of asking yourself, what would this person do? And so your identity is much more of a weighing system, or it's much more of a voting system where you cast votes in either direction based on your activities and what type of person you want to become. And I think the simplest distillation of this concept is simply asking the question, what would this type of person do? If you use that as the reframe, that you come back to over and over again, the chorus of your day that gets repeated over and over again. I think it's much easier to than trying to remember the 50-point checklist of all the activities that you need to do to achieve the goal. And so when we're confronted with these crosses, or you wake up in the morning, I don't know what I should start on, just ask yourself, what would a billionaire do? And so basically what you can do is have a certain refrain or chorus that you ask yourself, what would this type of person do? And that type of person, when you ask that question, is who you will eventually become as you continue to cast votes that reinforce the stories that you tell yourself about who you are. And those are the things that create long-lasting, deep change. These changes, when they become internal, when they become ingrained in our behavior, they become effortless, but it takes time. Rather than having that big checklist, you can just put a little post-it on your computer or wherever you work that's a reminder to yourself that this is the type of person that I want to become. And in order to become this type of person, I need to do these things because those actions will reinforce the thoughts that I say about myself. Because the whole concept behind affirmations that I do not like, which is like, I'm a lion, I'm a tiger, whatever, just saying them doesn't make them true. We have to give ourselves evidence that we are this type of person in order to become that. But how do you have evidence that you're going to be this person when you have none? Well, it starts with activity. It starts with doing the stuff. And so actually my senior quote for this year, and my favorite quote ever, is you don't gain confidence by shouting affirmations in the mirror, but by having an undeniable stack of proof you are who you say you are. Outwork your self-doubt. And so that kind of just like distills it down to give yourself the confidence that you're going, like that you are who you say you are. You have to do the actions that it takes to get there, because without the actions, nothing's going to flip. No switch is going to flip. And just because you wrote down the goal, because you just think of the goal, you're going to become that person. You actually have to do the actions. It's be, do, have, because we can distill it down to even do. Because you do, you have. Because you do, you be. Like if you think about identity, entity is being in itself, and an identical, which is repeated. So repeated beingness is what your identity is. So your actions, what you do literally becomes who you are, which means that we can actively change who we are by changing what we do. But it's a reinforcing circular path of like, I am this type of person, and therefore I do these things. And because I do these things, I'm this type of person, right? And so it's the chicken or the egg, right? But at some point, we need to take action in order to do that. And so I think the simple and easiest cue that we can use to change who we are, to change the character traits that we find undesirable, is to simply ask ourselves, when we're confronted with a decision, what would this type of person do? And then act in accordance to that. And I find it much simpler than having the lists and having the daily routines and the things like that. Because if you are this type of person, you will do the types of things that that type of person would do. And that also comes down to the many decisions that we haven't accounted for yet. You're going to be confronted with situations that you have not predicted. And in fact, the vast majority of us don't predict things well in general. It's because there's far more variables than we can possibly comprehend. And so I think it's much more useful to think about ourselves in terms of, if I were to encompass all the things that I would like to be, right? And that's why I think the what would Jesus do was such a powerful statement in the Christian community overall. And if it makes it easier for you to think in more tangible sense when you're asking yourself the questions, I think the reason the Jesus thing was so powerful is because there was a real, very real identity that they were associating with. And so I think the one of the big ones that I heard from Alex Mosey is what would that I ask myself is, what would King Solomon do? And he was considered one of the richest and most wisest men, which is someone that I like to revert back to. And he's also Alex Mosey is also one of the people that I tell myself is like, what would Alex Mosey do in this situation? I mean, like, I know I'm glazing, but like, that's the person who I want to become. And so if I think about like, what would he do in this situation, then I could probably, like, if I'm procrastinating all day, I'll think about, like, what would Alex do in this situation? He would probably not be procrastinating, get fucking his shit done, get to his computer, and just start grinding and stepping away at the stuff. And so that's what I do in the instance. I get to my computer and I start grinding on whatever I need to do, right? And that's kind of like a frame that you can use. When I ask myself that question, and it depends on the scenario, which person I'm going to draw on to answer the question, depending on what best suits the objective, etc. If you don't know someone that'll encompass that, then you can make it the value, or the version of yourself with that value, or you can just use an external person that embodies a lot of the character traits that you hope to have, and that can be equally as effective. So it just depends on who you are, but I think any of those are good strategies that you can employ to maximally use this kind of tactic for self-improvement and self-change. So a good point to end off on is that the only tactical thing that I have for you is to simply write down what type of person do I wish to become, and then make that the chorus that you recite to yourself when you're at a crossroad, when you're at your decision points that are going to create who you are on a repeated basis every single day. And I think going back to that refrain will be all encompassing in terms of what would Jesus do, applies to a zillion scenarios, but everyone, at least in the Christian faith, and I use it too, would want to become more Christ-like. And so whatever the Christ version is for you, we can steal from that concept and continually reinforce it by asking ourselves those questions. Well, if you ask yourself the next question, well, Eamon, I don't know what a billionaire would do, or I don't know what an IFBB Pro champ would do. Well, there's two ways that you can see this. Number one is that most people know what they need to do to lose weight, but they don't actually do it. And so I think that I can push back on the vast majority of people and say, no, you can probably do it. And I like this saying a lot. We need to be reminded more than we need to be taught. Most people know that they should be doing more than they are currently doing to achieve their goals. And a good example of that is that if your family were kidnapped, you would probably act differently when you're trying to save them, because you would take significantly more massive action in order to do so. You take huge action in order to accomplish the goals, which means that you're also the type of person that would want to save their family. And in doing that, you already knew what to do all along. You just weren't taking action. Now, that's the vast majority of situations, which is covered with that example. But if you're in the minority of situations, which is I don't know how to become a billionaire, right? Well, what are the things that would lead you towards that? Which might be you need to lower it a little bit, which is what would a millionaire do? And then you can, if it's not that, then you can lower it to, what would someone who's trying to become a millionaire do? They would probably talk to other millionaires, or they would go on YouTube. But if you want the goal bad enough, then you can ask the question in such a way that you would be able to answer it and make progress, right? And then the nature of the question itself can develop over time as you discover what you believe you need to do. And I really will say this again, the vast majority of us know what we need to do. We're just simply not doing it. And I think attacking why we're not doing it is a much more fruitful conversation than trying to discover the secrets of the universe. Because the people who achieve the really extraordinary things do the uncommonly obvious things for an inordinate period of time. And that's what separates them. It's because they do that because they are doing it because it's who they are, rather than something to achieve an outcome that is finite and external that they don't have control over. Because if you are doing it for who you are, then you will continue to play the game indefinitely, which will give you the outside returns, versus the person who is doing it to make money, which means that when they do make money, 1 month they pull back on the gas because they accomplished their objective, which is doing the external thing rather than being who they are, or more of who they want to be. And so if you're new to the channel, my name's Eamon. My co-host is Eddie. This is a solo episode. And so thank you for watching. Hopefully you use this kind of frame of mind, and hopefully it helps you, because it's helped me a lot in certain situations. And I think this is one of the biggest productivity hacks that I've used in my life, and I hopefully you guys get something from this. So thank you again. See ya.